when are you going to make a decision on whether to increase fares in London, and when would this increase likely take effect?
Thank you very much. So obviously I won't be making the decision. It will be the Mayor who'll be making the decision, and he'll be making the decision very soon. Obviously, when the funding deal was struck, there was a clause in there which gave a provision on matching the increase or decrease, indeed, theoretical, that the government might put on national rail fares. So that's one of the elements that he will have to take into consideration. But there will be a decision very soon.
Okay, so I take it from that your advice to the Mayor has gone in, essentially, on what you think the fare rise should be?
So obviously the discussions with TfL and me and looking at the relative benefits and disadvantages of different options, obviously we're having that discussion at the moment. But as I say, the final decision hasn't been made by the Mayor yet.
Okay. Can you explain to us, because this has been a bone of contention, exactly how constrained the Mayor is by the recent government decisions?
Obviously, when you look at the travel card fares and the cap, that is obviously something that is determined by the decisions that the government make on national rail fares. So in that sense, there is very little that the Mayor can do on that aspect of fares. On the individual fares, obviously the Mayor has discretion to raise or lower fares in every part of the network. The problem being, of course, that he is tied to the agreement that the government stipulated, which is that any shortfall, as in any amount that is below the figure that the government have decided on, would have to be made up by TfL. And we have, as part of the agreement, conditions put on us by government to increase revenue, and that is one of the downsides of the necessary agreement that we signed with government back in the summer.
So am I right that within the document that you signed in the summer, this is the August 2022 funding agreement, there is an assumption that we will follow the government's increase?
Yes. So in terms of managing the budget and presenting the business plan, TfL obviously had to make an assumption on the basis of what was written into the agreement. The assumption that TfL was planning on and the basis on which the business business plan has been put forward is a 4% increase. That was the working assumption that TfL has been operating to, and of course that's another element that the Mayor has had to take into account when he makes his decision.
But the actual agreement, sticking to the agreement, involves following the government. I'm not just talking about the assumption in terms of the numbers. The government's, so to be clear, the budget that we've put forwards, the numbers at the back of the agreement make the assumption that the increase will be 4%. The government's number has been 5.9%, but there are provisions within here that say the Mayor ought to be following the government's increase on average across our fares.
Yeah, it's important to separate the assumption that was made during the business planning process, which is you're absent of any data from government, against the decision that the government took just before the new year on setting the level of fare increases for National Rail. The agreement is very clear that any shortfall between the government's announced figure and the figure that the Mayor decides on has to be, if it's lower than the National Rail figure, that has to be made up. The difference has to be made up by TfL. Now, obviously, when we're in an environment where we have additional pressures arising from the funding agreement to increase revenue, that makes it even harder to see where that wiggle room might come from.
And when you say they have to you would have to make up the difference, or what? What would happen at that point?
Well, potentially we could see a reduction in support from government, and obviously, as we know, the support from government has been an essential part of maintaining the network going forward. You'll have heard this many times, but TfL is uniquely dependent on fare revenue when you look at other transport authorities around the world. And because of the decrease in fare revenue over the pandemic, we have had to seek government support to make up that shortfall. So if we receive less support from government, then obviously we need to find that money elsewhere. And we've already made a number of difficult decisions on how to increase TfL's revenue. So it would make a difficult situation more difficult.
Okay. I think it's fair to say that our average fare increase overall across London is going to be 5.9% then.
Well, as I say, that's a decision that the Mayor will have to take.
I can't see there's anything else that could come out of what you just said to us, though.
Well, you could draw your own conclusions as the decision that you might make in his position, but of course he has to take into account a whole range of factors, but those are the factors that he will consider when he makes a decision.